Welcome back to the Becoming Mind Strong podcast. And I will tell you honestly, behind the scenes, the last episode of the podcast that I did about why we get stuck, why we stay stuck, I did not intend for that to be a two-part series. That was supposed to be a one and done. This is the shining light of why we stay stuck. And sometimes what happens when I map out the podcast in advance, I'll map out the topics I want to talk about. We'll map out the order of things. But typically, what happens, because if you know me, you know I am such a big believer in alignment and things show up when they're supposed to. So I'll record a podcast and then I'll have a conversation with an Ignite member. And it's just this beautifully aligned moment of, oh, this is why I recorded that podcast. And that literally happened today. As I'm recording this, it is a Monday. And Friday, before I signed off work for the day, I had no intention of recording a podcast that day, but something in my gut, in my soul was like, you need to record this podcast now. And today, Monday, I get on a call with one of our Ignite members and she starts telling me what's coming up for her. And I am just like, oh, now I understand why I needed to record that podcast on Friday so urgently, because even though it's not going to go live for over a month, I need to send it to you right now. And my point in sharing that little backstory with you is because that conversation shined a light for me that there is a part two to this conversation, right? It's one thing for me to point out this is why we stay stuck. This is how we're making decisions. And if you didn't listen to that podcast, go back and listen to it first, right? I relate it back to teaching middle school and how so many people would get annoyed with middle schoolers because they're expecting them to make decisions as an adult. And that's just not how our brains work. And the point in that analogy, so to speak, is as adults, we treat ourselves the same way. We're trying to make decisions with the same brain that's trying to keep us safe. And again, I'm not going to rehash that entire podcast episode. If you did not listen to that one, go listen to it first, because today we're going to talk about, okay, I have faced fear. I have braced myself for the sting of committing, of not only deciding to change, but taking action. And there's kind of a part two to that of how we can get ourselves into a mindset of facing that fear, of making the scary choices, and of jumping off that cliff. So today is an unintentional but much needed part two of why we stay stuck, and most importantly, how to get unstuck. Check it out. There's a great quote by Albert Einstein. You know, sometimes we Google these quotes and they tell you they're they're by this person, and turns out they never said that. So I'm going to go off Google and say Albert Einstein said this quote, which I believe to be true. And Albert Einstein says, "You can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it." And when we talk about this feeling of being stuck, right? Of sitting there and talking about and wishing and hoping and saying, I need to change. I need to do something differently. And as we talked about in that last podcast episode, right, what happens for most of us is we talk and we talk and we wish and we hope and we pray. But what we're not prepared for is when we get to the edge of that cliff, when it is truly time for, what is that expression? The rubber to hit the road, right? To take action. What happens for the vast majority of people is when it is time for that action, when it is time for change, when it is time for the rubber to hit the road, if that's the right expression, fear pops in. Because what we weren't braced for is that if we truly want to change, if we want to jump off that cliff and make a change, we're not prepared for that sting. We're not prepared for that discomfort, right? And in the last episode, we talked about, for a lot of people, that's financial. It's not always financial. It could be the discomfort of heartache. It could be the discomfort of logistics, finding a new place to live, whatever that discomfort is. Most of us don't want to feel it. So we regress right back into our comfort zone. So here's Albert Einstein saying, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. And I ended that last episode by talking about making decisions as your future self. And that can sound super cheesy. That can sound super self-helpy, but there is a truth to that. And I want to really dig in here and understand why. You know me well by now. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know I am not about rainbows and glitter and unicorns. I'm about neuroscience, right? I'm about psychology and human nature. So if your brain that exists right now is designed for safety, which it is, your brain is, my brain is, all of our brains are designed for safety, right? It makes sense that without doing this work, of course, at that moment of discomfort, at that moment of jumping off the cliff, your brain is going to do everything in its power to get you back to homeostasis, to get you back to your comfort zone. And if we are trying to use that same mind that is literally wired, neural connections wired in our brain, that has been reinforced for decades upon decades of talking about, I want to change, thinking about, I want to change, but then getting to the cusp of change and letting fear talk us out of it. The you that exists right now, unless you've consciously done this work, the every human on this earth, unless they have consciously done this work, our brain is literally wired to listen to fear and go back to our comfort zone. That is the mind that's created the problem. So when we get to this cusp, when we get to this cliff, so to speak, and we're like, this is freaking it, not another day, not another minute, not another second. Today is the day I take control of my health. You get on a strategy session with me. We talk about the program. You're like, yes, holy grail, keys to the kingdom. Let's go. Then we talk about investing in yourself. And again, for the 10th time, I'm going to say it again. I use this as an analogy because it's what I do all day, every day. Insert leaving a toxic relationship. Insert getting into a relationship when you're afraid of being vulnerable. Insert leaving your 9 to 5 to start a business, right? Doesn't matter the topic. The brain that you have reinforced for safety year after year after decade is the brain that created this problem. Now, I want to add a little caveat to that, right? Our brains are not a problem. It is fantastic that our brains are designed for safety. If your brain wasn't designed for safety, you wouldn't be here listening to this podcast by now because you'd probably be dead. But the problem is, and if you've listened to my content before, you know this, while we as humans have evolved, our brains have not in a lot of ways. So right now, your brain literally doesn't know the difference between the discomfort of leaving a toxic relationship, of knowing the discomfort of investing in yourself when you're used to putting everyone else first, between that and being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Your brain doesn't know the difference. Fear is fear. Fear equals death. Okay. So when I say your brain that has been wired for decades upon decades upon decades is the brain that created this problem, I just want to add a little note here. Safety is not a problem. Fear, not facing it, not acknowledging it for what it is, that is a sign that we're on to something new and big and badass. That's the problem. We cannot solve the problem with the same mind that created it. When I ended that last podcast by talking about thinking as our future self, what this is not is rainbows and glitter and unicorns. What this is understanding that quote. Your brain as it exists right now is never going to be comfortable taking that leap. It is never going to convince you to take that leap, right? Sometimes I'll go back to these strategy sessions. I get on these strategy sessions with people. They tell me, yes, these are the keys to the kingdom. I know I need this. It's only finances. It just feels scary. And how do they end the call? Can I think about it? And I'll ask them, absolutely. We're going to work together when you are ready to do the work. But let me ask you, what are you thinking about? Like, be specific with me. Is this the program that's going to change my life? Is Rachel a good coach, or her coach is thoroughly trained? What are we thinking about? Well, no. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this program has changed my life. I've read your book. I've binged your podcast. I know this is what I need. It's an investment, and that feels scary. So we talk about it, we work through it. But the point I'm sharing is this. What I will tell them, because I am transparent about this, because this is not Rachel being a hard sell. This is the human brain. This is neuroscience. I will tell them, listen, if you need to think about this for 24 hours, go think about it. We'll book in a call for tomorrow. Cool. What I can tell you is this. No one in the history of ever has your brain convinced you in 24 hours of thinking about it to invest in yourself. No one in the history of ever has sat with the thing that scares the crap out of them and talked themselves into it. When we're sitting with a big, scary decision, whether it's investing, whether, again, it's leaving a relationship, getting into one, quitting our job to start a business, when we do push ourselves over that cliff, when we do make the leap, it is not because your human brain has decided, okay, this is safe, let's do it. There is one thing and one thing only that creates the catalyst for change. And that is not thinking your way into it. That is thinking with a new mind. I'm going to say that again. That is not thinking your way into it. It is not making a pros and cons list. It is not sitting in front of a mirror, beating your chest, saying mantras. It is thinking with a new mind. So what does that mean, Rachel? Like, I am who I am. How do I think with a new mind? There is a truth of humans that our brains cannot exist in a world where the internal and external don't match. You've heard me talk about this in the past. If you've hung out here, my favorite analogy is that there is a startling statistic that the average lottery winner blows their earnings within 3 years. And the answer is not just because they came into a bunch of cash and now they're just going to spend, spend, spend. The reason is because our brains can't exist in a world where the internal and external don't match. So if you have a core belief that money makes you selfish, that money's the root of all evil, that you having money takes away from someone else who's in need, well, coming into more money doesn't do anything to unwire your brain for that limiting belief. All it does is put you in a situation where your internal thoughts don't match your external situation. And of course, which one is going to run out, right? This money's been in your hand for a year, maybe. That deep-seated belief has probably been there since childhood and has been reinforced and rewired and myelinated for decades upon decades upon decades, looking for proof your whole life that, oh, look, that person's selfish. They have money. And every time you saw proof, because this is how the human brain works, that neural connection became more and more coated with myelin. Now it is a deep-rooted belief. So coming into a bunch of cash doesn't do anything except create conflict. Your belief system does not match your external circumstance. Which one of those has been around longer? The belief system. So of course we self-sabotage. So let's bring this back to what we're talking about here today. If you have spent a lifetime of talking about all this change you want to make, and you have spent a lifetime of getting to that cusp of change, but letting fear, letting action, letting that sting, letting the discomfort push you right back into your comfort zone. That's a really, really deep-rooted neural connection right now. And sitting there and thinking about it and writing pros and cons lists and ruminating on it and losing sleep over it, I promise you right now which one is going to win. Promise you. The key to this is we have to start thinking as the person we are working to be. And let me put a little caveat here as well. You are wonderful as you are. When I talk about unleashing our lives, stepping into our power, that is not because you are broken right now. That is not because you can't love your life right now. And most of us have a version of ourselves that we dream of, that we work towards, that we aspire to be. And what we're talking about here is stepping into that person that already exists. We just have to get the internal and external to start matching. So if we're tracking, we now understand, as old Albie said, we can't solve the problem with the same mind that created it. So the question becomes, okay, Rachel, I get it. Like I have spent a lifetime wiring my brain to listen to fear, wiring my brain for safety and for comfort. The question is, what's my choice, right? I only have one brain. So when you talk about making decisions from a second mind, what does that mean? Here's what I mean by that. And I like to get really logistical about this because, again, our brains can't exist in a world where the internal and external don't match. One of my favorite, not even one of my favorite exercise for this is to slap a label on the two versions of you. Okay, so there is a version of all of us that is fear-based, that is safety-based, that is the one that's been calling the shots and getting us back to homeostasis each and every time that fear and action and sting and discomfort came up. Now, we're not shaming that part. We're not saying that part sucks. I wish you didn't exist. No, again, that part serves a purpose. It's here to keep us safe. But what we need to do is retrain that part of us to say, hey, you know what? I appreciate you. Thanks for being a little warning sign. But what you don't get to do is drive the bus anymore, right? If you've listened to my content on fear, it's a very similar conversation with the part of us that is fear-based. So we're going to give that part of us a name. Let's say your name is Tina, okay? That part of you might be timid Tina. And it's important that we put a label on this because you're going to see as we go on with this exercise that we're going to be referring to this part of you by name, okay? Timid Tina has lots of thoughts, lots of worries, right? What if I quit this job and I don't make any money and my business fails and I can't provide for my family? What if I go on this weight loss journey and I invest in myself and I put in all this effort on the other side, it doesn't work? What if it does work and I can't maintain it and I gain all the weight back? What if I leave this person and 5 years down the road, I realize that now I'm lonely and I wish I'd never made this choice, right? Those are all fear-based thoughts. It doesn't mean there's not any validity to them. Our brain doesn't just spew random stuff at it. There is something at the core where it's found a thread of truth and it is pushing on that bruise. But we can also recognize that those are really fear-based thoughts. And when we can shine that light of awareness, we can see, ooh, yeah, it makes sense why I am where I am right now. Because timid Tina, she is strong. She is deeply wired and she has been calling the shots. Now, I'm going to talk you through the two parts of this and I'll walk you through the exercise. There is another version of you who is standing in her power, who is living her unleashed life, who doesn't, pardon my French, does not give a shit about the what ifs because she knows burn the boats, come hell or high water. This is what I was put on earth to do. Now, she comes in few and far between in times, right? We don't, most of us, unless we have done this work, we don't live in that state, but we have moments. You listen to a TED talk, you go to a Tony Robbins convention, right? Maybe you get sparks of it on a podcast and you're like, yeah, let's freaking go. But the problem is that dies down really quickly because timid Tina, she's been around a lot longer. But when we can tap into this other side of us, that is the version of you that we need to start letting drive the ship, that we need to start making decisions as. So when you're standing in your power, let's say that your name is Emily. Okay. I probably should have planned these out in advance, but we're making them out on the spot. Empowered Emily, man, empowered Emily does not give a shit. Empowered Emily knows burn the boats. There's no plan B. Doesn't mean I'm not going to come up with a budget and make smart decisions and have a business plan. But I was put on this earth to be a coach, and I am going to fall on my butt 100 times if I have to, but I'm going to get up 101 and I'm going to do this. I know empowered Emily knows that it is scary as heck to invest in yourself, but she also knows what happens if she doesn't. So empowered Emily knows that she is the person who does the big scary things so that she can live the life of her dreams. These are two, in your, when we do this exercise, we're going to give them the same name, right? You're going to use your name. You're going to come up with a cute name for the timid version, and the empowered version, it doesn't have to start with the first letter of your name. It's just kind of a cute thing. It's important that the name resonates with you, right? Sometimes people say, oh, empowered Emily, but the word empowered doesn't actually do anything for them. Maybe your word is unleashed, like unleashed Rachel, right? That doesn't both start with R, it doesn't matter, but those are the words that resonate. I had an Ignite member who we were using the word timid, and she was like, oh, that's not what it feels like. It feels like paralyzed. Like I feel so stuck. I feel like I'm paralyzed. And that was the word that resonated with her. Okay. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to give a name to the two parts of you. And when you give that name, don't just arbitrarily make it up. Like we want to feel this in our body. When you lean into timid Tina, what does it feel like? What does it feel like in your body? Are you shrunken down? Are you tight? Are you anxious? Is your head spinning? Is your stomach in knots? And create a name that embodies those feelings for you. Then take a breath, shake it off, like literally shake the energy off you. Maybe blast some Taylor Swift. And we're going to ground ourselves. We're going to center ourselves. So maybe you take a deep breath, close your eyes, whatever you need to do to step into your power. Now, if that little voice in your head starts kicking up and telling you, this is so dumb, I'm never going to do this, cool. We don't have to do it. And we could stay as timid Tina. Why not just play a game? Why not just see what happens, right? Who doesn't want to feel good? We're going to release some dopamine for a bit. Whether you ever use it or not, who cares? Let's just play a game for a little bit, right? Talk that voice down with, we're not committing to anything. This Rachel chick says it works. Let's just try it. When you think as that highest version of yourself, that unleashed, empowered, whatever your word is, version of yourself, what does that feel like in your body? Right? If you listen to my podcast, you know I talk about my chest feels like it's ripping open, like there's light radiating out and in at the same time. What does it feel like in your body? And what word do you use as the label for that version of you? Now, here's where we get a little cute. We get a little creative. I want you to take a piece of paper, blank white paper, if you can find it, draw a line down the middle. Okay. On the left side, and I love doing this in actually drawing. And if you know me, like I can't draw a stick figure. I suck at drawing. Okay. But you're going to write the title on top, Timid Tina. And under that, you're going to draw a picture of what she looks like and make it silly, like shaking and sweating and tight in her body. Maybe she's in a cage or a cube that she can barely move around. You can do it in speaking bubbles. You can do it in thought bubbles. You can just write words around it. I want you to write down the words that Timid Tina says, Timid Tina talks, and the thoughts that she has. What if I try this and fails? What if I hit my goal and I can't sustain it? What if they leave me? What if I fall in love and then they cheat on me again? Every thought that from a fear-based place, Timid Tina has. Then again, shake it off, remove that energy. Maybe you take a break, whatever you need to do, move to the right side. Empowered Emily, or whatever you, again, this is your name. You're going to use your name for both of these. I just couldn't think of a T word on the spot. What thoughts does she think? What words does she say? She might say things like, I was put on this earth to be a coach, and there is nothing that can stop me. I know that failure is just data, so I don't care how many times I get knocked on my butt, I am getting back up. I know that living in a scarcity mindset is creating scarcity in my own business, let alone in my life. And I lead by example by investing in myself. I know that the people who live the life of their dreams face fear every day and they do the scary things. What words, what phrases, what thoughts does empowered Emily think, say, and do? Okay. Again, you're going to draw a picture there. So maybe she's got big muscles. Maybe she's wearing a cape, whatever that feels like for you. Now, what you do with that is up to you. What I did with it back when I did this exercise, and every once in a while I'll come back to this, but the first time I ever did it, I put it front and center on my wall because I wanted to look that thing in the face every day and ask myself who I was making decisions as. I don't do that anymore. Maybe you live in a household with other people and you don't want them to see it because that feels silly. You don't have to do that. The point of keeping that front and center, however, is that at every moment in life, you get to choose. Who am I making decisions as? And the reason I'm big on these names is because it's quick and dirty, right? It's quick and easy. Instead of being like, oh, am I making fear-based decisions or am I making empowered? Like, no, am I thinking as Timid Tina or am I thinking as empowered Emily? Like, boom, boom, boom. Who's calling the shots right now? And every moment in life, you're going to have an opportunity to practice. Now, I want to be abundantly clear about something. What you are most likely not going to be successful at is doing big, scary things right off the bat because you slapped a new label on it, right? I don't suggest if you've been thinking about quitting your job for 10 years and Timid Tina has talked you out of it, maybe we don't practice by telling our boss to screw off, quitting that day and diving full in with the business. That's a bit extreme. That's a lot of overload for our brain. But maybe at work, there's a tough conversation that in the past you would have shied away from. So you leave the room, you take a breath and you say, you know what? Timid Tina would do this over email. Timid Tina would ask someone else to handle this. But empowered Emily, she knows that she has every right to speak up about this and she can do it in a professional way while still speaking her truth. So let's practice. Let's practice being empowered Emily. It's going to be messy practice. It's going to be imperfect practice, but let's just practice. And when we start looking for these tiny, emphasis on tiny little steps to practice, here's what starts to happen. Our brains cannot exist in a world where the internal and external do not match. So when you start making choices, when you start thinking, when you start speaking, because we can start red flagging the words that come out of our mouth. Is that a Timid Tina statement or is that an empowered Emily statement? When we start living like this, people talk a lot about fake it till you make it, live as if, kind of, but that's not enough. It's not about faking it till you become something. It's already in you. If you can think these thoughts, if you can have these aspirations, if you can tap into this, guess what? It already exists in you. You're not faking anything. You've just spent decades wiring in Timid Tina. So now we're going to focus the other way. And that's a huge statement, by the way, if you just followed this. We are not faking anything. We are tapping into a side that hasn't gotten enough time, energy, and brain wiring so far. And here's the beautiful part. The more time you spend leaning into this empowered, this unleashed, this best, highest, whatever your word is, version of yourself, your brain, we know enough about neural connections here, your brain is going to wire that way. You have no choice. You can't control that. And because our brains cannot exist in a world where the internal and external don't match, your life has absolutely no choice but to transform into the life that empowered Emily is building. Where most people get stuck is they go through life day after day after day, trying to solve a problem with the same mind that created it. They're trying to talk timid Tina into doing big, scary things. And I love you. Let me save you the next decade of your life. Timid Tina is never going to make those decisions. Waiting for 24 hours about making an investment, you're never going to talk yourself into it with a pros and cons list. The way we do big, scary things is by drawing a line in the sand, embracing, you know what? Fear is coming up right now because this is big and scary and new. Deep breath. I know that if I'm about to face fear, there is some kind of sting that's going to come with it. It's going to be financial. It's going to be heartache. It's going to be logistics. It's going to be time. It's going to be energy. It's going to be all of the above. I also know that I have lived a life as timid Tina. Finally, I know that I am freaking done. Not another second of this one precious life I'm given. Today is the day. And timid Tina, she's not going to be the one to make this decision. But empowered Emily, oh, she will freaking do this. So if I need to lean into her and channel her right now, let's freaking go. And we leap, and our brain gets more and more proof. I encourage you, as hokey as it might feel, as cheesy as it might feel, do this exercise. Grab a piece of paper, come up with your timid alter ego, come up with your empowered alter ego, draw a picture around it, put every thought, feeling, action that comes with each one. If you're willing to, stick it on your wall so it stares you in the face every day. Put it on your bathroom mirror. If that feels silly for you, if you don't want people around you seeing it, cool. That you don't have to do. You don't have to do any of this, but you don't have to do that part. But start finding little areas in your day, not big, massive ones, not major life overhauls, right? Our brains are designed for safety. Find little areas in your day where you can start practicing. What would empowered Emily do? Oh, wait a second. That sounds like a timid Tina thought. Okay, I caught you. I see it. When you start red flagging this, forget it. Game over. You can't unhear it. What would empowered Emily do right now? And the beauty of the human brain is you don't have to force this, right? It's the same conversation we have here about nutrition, about weight loss. Our only job is to get a snowball rolling down a hill, because every time we repeat a thought, we repeat an action, myelin coats our brain. And because our brain cannot exist in a world where the internal and external don't match, if the only thing we focus on, I'm going to put only in huge air quotes, if the only thing we focus on is which part of us that already exists within us, which part of us we're putting time, attention, focus, and energy on, our brain is naturally going to rewire to be that person, and our world is organically going to transform.